It's Don here from the board. Thanks for coming along and checking out this video. Well, in this video we're going to be having a look at the Minleaf ML-MS1 mini portable table saw. So why am I looking at a table saw for a keyboard related channel? Well, it's because they're a really versatile piece of kit that can help you make all sorts of interesting things for keyboards. First of all, before we get anywhere, I want to say that this product was sent to me courtesy of Banggood for review. I did not pay for this unit. However, I have actually checked the boxes on YouTube to indicate that it could be considered a form of paid promotion. But everything that I say, all of my opinions from this review, good or bad, are 100% my own, and it's not a paid endorsement. So take that however you will. So, look, if you've been watching videos on my channel for a long time, you know I like messing around with different kind of tools, and I find ways to adapt them for keyboard use, and things like the CNC, as well as the laser engraver, as well as the little mini bench drill. So when I had an opportunity to check out a tabletop saw as well, I said, why not? And for me it's really interesting because there's a lot of things in our keyboard space that people have made lovely things out of wood or other lightweight materials. People have made cases, they've made wrist rests, they've made artisan cases, and so on and so forth. Some of them may have used tabletop saws, some of them may have used band saws, others might have been, what do they call them? Not jigsaws, well you can use jigsaws as well, routers, but there's an actual type of cutter. It's like a hot wire cutter, but it's an reciprocating saw, something like that. Anyway, so I thought I'd take the chance to make good from Banggood and check out this saw. So let's have a look at the actual product first and what it's promising before we crack open the box. Then we'll jump to a bit where I'm going to hopefully do this outside with some scrap timber and make some cuts and see what I can get and what the quality is like. And then of course my concluding remarks. So here is the product. You can see it's about $82 plus a couple of dollars for shipping to Australia. 25 business days is probably closer to what it takes now thanks to COVID. Yay COVID! That's what it's meant to look like. It's green, single saw, it has a guide, it has a angled guide as well that can slide with your workpiece to cut angles with. It's got a bit of protection over the top. There's a bunch of pictures there showing a couple of different sides. It's got a vacuum port on the back as well, which I don't have a shop vac, so you probably have to use this in limited amounts before you empty it out, clean it out, that kind of thing. In terms of the details, I've got a 220 volt version here, of course, because Australian power is 240. It's only 480 watts, 800 RPMs when under no load. So under load, goodness knows what that's actually going to be like. So yeah, little explode diagram, some parts, some photoshopped pictures of it on a table. It reckons it can actually cut aluminium panels. I don't have any right now anyway. Who knows what it's going to be like in the future, but definitely some plastic, some wood, 8mm, so better check that whatever I've got is going to be under 8mm. So that's what it looks like. We'll crack it open and see if it matches our expectations, and then I'll have to find some time to go outside and check it out. Right, onto the desktop. Okay, so here it is in the atypical Banggood orange now. It hasn't actually been opened, but the other side is got my postal address on it. You can kind of see it a bit worse for wear. It copped a lot of scrapes along the way. There is no additional protection on this. It's literally this sachet. So, you know, it could have had the box kicked in, but it feels like it's okay. We'll just find out. Rightio, so mini bench saw. The box is upside down, but it's nice that they tell us on the bottom it's a mini bench saw. It's not too heavy, I would say. There's the actual box. The side has that same exploded diagram. It's got some dimensions on it. So it says maximum cutting depth 15 mil, even though it says the actual, well, I guess the depth must be related to one of these dimensions, maybe. Well, it's got 16 mil, so I don't know, that's a bit funny. And then front and back, it talks about the angle holder. It's got the, what they call a backer, but it's the guide rail there. It's got some sawdust cleaning and a dust vac port. Right, let's actually pull it out. Weight wise, I don't know how much it weighs. Let me just have a look if it shows what the weight is. Net weight 2.35 kilos. There you go. Okay. Bump the microwave a little. Bump the microphone, not the microwave. Okay, so a bit of lightweight foam. Some instructions, despite the website having instructions as well for download. And there it is. Wow, it really is tiny. And it smells of that really horrible factory plastic smell. Anybody who's bought something straight from like China will know exactly what I'm talking about. So that's actually really cool. In the accessories kit, there's the guide. You can see it's actually given you spare carbon brushes, which is really, really cool. I think that's a great move. There's the guide. There's the straight guide there. Okay. And that's it. So there's the power cable and the plug. I'll pull that out. Whoosh. Nothing else is in the box except some more foam. Oh, it's got that horrible that horrible plastic factory plastic smell. Ugh. It'll definitely have to get some airing out. Okay, so now look at that. It is not a native Australian plug, despite the fact that it is a 250 volt. So I will have to use something like one of these converters. So that should just go in like that, and that would work perfectly fine. It is interesting that they didn't provide one, because normally when they have these kinds of things, they actually give you one. But that's okay. I've got one spare, not a problem. Footprint wise, look how small this is. It truly is tiny. Like, tiny. Now that's really glossy, but it's actually textured. It's got some kind of spiral texture to that. We can see the milling marks in that actual track for the angle glide, and it does have a ruler 0 to 3, 0 to 7. So if we take an actual ruler and measure it, how accurate is this? Yeah, it's pretty good, spot on. And on this side, if I go to the 0, okay, so on the left hand side it's actually drifting, because straight off the bat from 1 centimeter it's under a centimeter, it's under a centimeter, and the drift just gets worse. So by the time you actually get to 7 centimeters, it's about half a mil out. So you just need to be careful about that, because the accuracy on that side is definitely not as good as the accuracy on the right hand side. Before I go attaching things, I don't quite understand why there's a symbol of a bull head button, the saw blade, with a piece of material there. I'm really confused about that. There's just a straight on-off switch here, so there's no e-stop. Underneath is pretty simple, nothing gone on there, and on the back there's just that which the vacuum suction thing will go onto there to help adapt to a vacuum cleaner or a dust extractor shop vac type of thing. So that guide's pretty weak. That does move quite freely, which is nice. In terms of the blade, yeah, it's pretty sharp. I can feel a good amount of resistance, so the motor on that's probably got good torque, but it's just covered in powder. I don't quite know what that is. Probably have to, when I take it outside, give it a spin up and let it blow itself clean. I suppose the thing I'm not too happy with is the fact that if you're guiding a piece, the large population is going to be right-handed. Okay, so if you're actually working with something, you probably want an e-stop on the side of the piece. You're not likely to have something that's going to be hanging over because you're going to be cutting flat. So having something on that side as well, because that's not an emergency stop. I can understand that when you're there you can try and quickly hit that to turn it off, but a bigger emergency stop button would definitely have been appreciated more. Now I've got some plywood. I'm not going to cut at my desk here because obviously that's going to get sawdust all over the place, so it would not be a smart idea. But I've got some ply, and I think it's what is it, 6mm? Yep, it's 6mm, and there's plenty of headspace on that at the highest position, so you can sort of see that's what the 6mm looks like against the blade. If it can, it'll focus. Okay, it does say 13mm, but let's see what that actually looks like. I'm going to say it's probably capable of 13, but just. Depends on how much movement you've got up and down on that as the motor is turning. So it seems to be holding pretty true for most of what it's claiming. There's just some vac bits. Let's try fitting on that guide and that slide. So does that move? It moves fairly smooth. You can hear that grinding sound, which I don't really like. Over time, that's just going to eat away at your actual metal and material. Had they finished this plate so it was nice and smooth, I think that's probably actually better. But it's okay. It's not too bad. So what that would allow me to do is I could say I want a 40... I don't even know where these marks are going. Well, that's 90 degrees. Is that 15? No. 15, 30. Is that 45? So let me think. 10, 15, 40. Okay, so there's 45. So each one of these marks is a 5-degree angle. So I just bring that up to the camera so you can see. So they've just got these marks. The contrast isn't great. There we go. And so every one of these sets is a 5-degree by the looks of it. So if I wanted to hold my piece at 45 degrees, obviously I'm using it the wrong direction. I should be going this way. Okay, there we go. So if I had my workpiece, you can see it's kind of limiting because I'm already falling off the end of the table here if you want something nice and wide, but I can hold that at 45 degrees and it will help guide me through and cut at 45 degrees, theoretically. Okay, now for this bit, how does this work? Oh, okay. So it actually goes and hooks in, and then by turning this knob, it's pushing against the main block and pushing this backwards to lock it in. So it's not actually clamping it to the main plate, it's actually pushing against the bottom. There's a bit of you can see the metal underneath there. So what it's doing is the screw is pushing that way against that metal plate to push the hook this way towards you, and that's what locks it in. A little bit, I mean, I don't know if that's standard or not, but let's just put it on, I don't know, say 6 centimeters, give that a finger tight. Yeah, it's pretty good, it's pretty stable, doesn't seem to want to rock too much. Okay, and then of course if I was going to run a piece down it, I can, just like that. The only thing that I'm going to complain about right now, and some of you who are more experienced, oh look, cool, there's a spare belt for the actual motor to the blade, which is pretty cool. There is no push rod. There is no push rod. If you use a normal table saw, it is quite conventional. Wow, this thing is wonky and really weak. It's already flopping to one side, bent to one side, and I haven't done anything to it. It's quite conventional to provide a push rod. So it's basically just a long bit with like a 90-degree that you can put to help you move material through the saw without risking your fingers. The fact that they haven't given you one, for those who know about them or have the experience, they can just make themselves one. But if you're brand new to playing around with these kind of things and you don't know, you are really risking hurting yourself, cutting your fingers, and having a really bad accident. So that's not cool. They really should provide one. But that's something that, you know, I can cobble together something out of other materials that I've got. So I'm not too worried about that for myself. So that's one criticism. In regards to the instructions, very basic. Looks like it was written in the 80s. Tells you about how to open it to change the belt, how to assemble the vacuum. You can replace the blade, and then there's that exploded diagram again. So pretty rudimentary. Now I realize I've just spent 17 minutes going through this, but you know, it is a piece of equipment that can really hurt you, and I did want to check it through and see what it was like. Build quality, you know, it's pretty sturdy, pretty rugged. It doesn't feel like any of it's going to come apart. It doesn't flex. Seems okay. So I've got a slab here. At some point in time I will go outside and I'll make some cuts. For those who have been around, you would have seen this thing before. So this is a little switch holder that I milled using the CNC. So you can see the couple of videos on that and the horror story that was the little mini CNC. So I'll take some measurements, draw up some 14 mil spacings in a way, and I'll try and run some cuts with this and see if I can use a bit of PVA glue, you know, and just glue together something like this. Hopefully we'll see a bit of a montage after this, and then we'll be back afterwards with the experience and how well or how not well this mini table saw performs. So we'll see you on the other side, hopefully with all 10 fingers. Oh, and don't forget safety glasses and ear protection, super important as well when you're working with things like these. Rightio, we'll be back. Okay, so I've just done some cutting, which you can see down here. I've got some 20 mil that I've actually cut and some 14 mil, and I was just showing at the end of that video and sort of just can cobble them together into a makeshift switch holder, right? Could probably get in 3 spots in here, maybe 4. I don't know, we'll just have to see how it goes, jiggle with it, whatnot. In terms of accuracy, I actually think it's probably okay. And we'll look at this a little bit closer, but you know, I went for 20 mil. It's pretty close to 20 mil, and these were meant to be 14 by 14. They're about 14 in a little bit, but it's because on one dimension I pushed it to 15 because I was kind of not sure about how the kerf was, and the other one I pushed it closer to 14. So you can see that dimensionally they're pretty close. I've just taken this side panel off, which gets you access to the actual blade chamber. You can see all that sawdust is just collecting down there. The motor is actually belt driven on the other side of the compartment wall, so it's a good separation because you're not going to get all that sawdust clogging, and that's the vacuum port that should be drawing air through it. So I'm going to end up cleaning this out, dumping it out because I didn't have a vacuum attached to it, but if you do have a shop vac or a vacuum cleaner that you can attach to it, you'd certainly have a better performance because it's not going to end up down here like what I've got in my unit right now. The only other thing is this little metal plate here, which is what the hex screw goes into. It does move, and I was kind of concerned. You can see there's a bit of shard right there. It is going to actually strip itself. It was very poorly threaded on. It's not focusing very well, but there is already some damage you can see right there on that bolt. So you may actually end up having to get a replacement bolt for this over time as you open and close it if you're not using a vacuum to suck out the actual debris. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this up. I measured the decibels. It was sitting at around 75, 76 decibels, so it's actually not too loud, but we'll have a look at the end product and what I do with this, as well as my closing thoughts on how this Minleaf table portable saw goes. See you soon. Alrighty, so I'm back inside. Hopefully you would have seen just that little speed up of me trying to film with my phone on a tiny little tripod outside, and what I got results, as well as that little short clip showing the amount of sawdust that collects inside this actual unit when you're using it. So let's just you know, talk about the experience of cutting it before we have a look at what I ended up with, and then some final thoughts. I can now understand and appreciate the very fine texture that's on this plate. Having this texture gives you better control in pushing your material through. It's not like it's rough that it's going to eat and mar the surface of whatever it is that you're cutting, I feel, but it stops it from being too smooth, and it gives you actually good feedback on moving that material through at a steady state. The sharpness of the blade straight up was pretty good. It went through the plywood, no issues whatsoever. And you might notice that this is actually quite thick because I decided to go with the 12 mil simply because the 6 mil would be too short for a switch to sit on top without the pins poking out the bottom. And I didn't want to bother at this point in time anyway, for the purposes of testing this, with having to stick 2 layers together. Now, it reckons it can do 13 mil cuts, and this is 12 mil, cut it perfectly fine. No issues with it whatsoever. Look, plywood's not the hardest thing in the world, so it cutting plywood wasn't really too much of a challenge for it remotely. The guide worked pretty well. No issues with that whatsoever. You know, it slid along, gave a good amount of resistance, and provided the support at 90 degrees that I wanted. I sort of just set that to 90 degrees, and it seemed to work pretty okay. And, you know, just has enough clearance in between the blade and the edge of that guide to get my material through. This straight rail, it worked fine for most part. I think the only thing that it was bothering me was the fact that it doesn't line up straight. So when you put it on and you get the edge of it, as you tighten it down, it actually pushes it to one side. It's a very, very fine angle. And on the long cuts that I was doing, there is actually a very fine bowing that is visible there, which is why I was actually putting it on the plate to see if I could see that. And it's very, very small, but it is there. So when you're actually pushing it, it does kind of actually go at a little bit of an angle. The other thing is, because it's textured, and if you're trying to make quick adjustments, loosening it to a certain point so then you can actually wiggle it around. I realize this is a very cheap unit, so you're not going to get a lot of features on it, but it would be nice that instead of it being a thumb screw on the end of this, maybe like a quick lever would be better, so that you could set it in, and then rather than having to do a whole bunch of rotations on it, because you want to be able to give it enough turn to not catch as you're sliding at large amounts like it's kind of trying to do right now. Whereas if you get a bit more, it slides really free. So if you had a quick detach, a quick lever kind of thing, maybe spring loaded even, that you could just flip down, then it would allow you that full range of motion and then flip up to lock in, since your material's not going to sit on top of it anyway. So just a bar, you know, like the ones on bicycle seat posts, right? On scooters and stuff like that. That would make a big difference to the usability of this rail if you were changing between widths a lot. If you're doing cuts and they're all the same size, if you're only going to do a small number of cuts, it's not really that big a deal. It's just a quality of life thing, right? In terms of the gradient, we already identified that the scale slides. It's not super accurate, and I talked about that in the little clip from outside, because I originally set it to my pencil mark on the first cut, and it was actually just off if I was lining up the kerf. So I sort of adjusted it a little bit more, and that's why these squares, if we now start looking at what we ended up with, they actually measure just on 14 in one direction, and then the same cut, well, same piece being cut in the other direction, measures 14 and a half. So going to the 15 mil mark, it's cutting at 14 and a half. Whereas when I manually lined it up to my pencil line to the edge of the blade for the kerf, I was actually able to get it onto 14. So I wouldn't trust the engraving on this very well. It's going to give you a rough indicator if you're doing rough cuts, but if you want accuracy, you're far better off marking it on your workpiece and lining up the rail so that you get that line against the blade instead. Smoothness of the cut, it's actually really nice. The RPMs on this is quite nice. You can see it's given it quite a shine to cutting it, so gives you a good finish. And on plywood, that's actually pretty good, simply because plywood has a habit of splintering and breaking off chunks if you're not using a good blade to it. Hesitation on cuts is definitely visible. Now this is the piece that got jammed, and you can see the actual radius as I was unable to push it past. And this is going to be an annoyance for me if I'm using this saw a lot, that this guide is this, well, the arm bit that holds this top cover is bent. It doesn't line up to the blade. So if you go back and have a look at the time-lapse bit, as I was pushing material in, it would cut, and then I would come to a stop, and I'd have to nudge this so that this arm bit goes into the hole into the slot that's been cut by the blade before I can get it past. When I was cutting the small bits, what had happened was these were going up, and there was two of them, and then on the third one it was hitting that point there. So I'll just lift it close to the camera to show you what I'm talking about. Focus. Okay, so the little metal bit at the top there is hitting the block, and that's exactly what was happening. So I had to stop it, pull these out, and then go again. So it meant I could only cut 2 blocks because I was trying to hold the block against the rail and slide it, and then I didn't really have a free finger to wiggle this thing to try and get it to go past, and it was all sorts of bad and all sorts of dangerous. The other thing was, I just didn't feel safe or comfortable trying to cut this last piece to get that small rectangle out. I'm not very experienced, so I'm willing to admit that that's part of the problem. And despite the fact that I made a push tool, so this is just some paddle pop sticks with tape that I've cut and taped together with masking tape. It's quite strong and it does the job. This is what I was talking about, in that when these pieces were going down the side, you want to still provide good amount of even force. If you don't, and you're only pushing from one side, you're likely to get wobbling cuts and all sorts of other issues. So by putting that on top there, and on the side profile view, it looks like that. So you're actually providing the guidance to the piece and you can move it along. So that was really easy to knock up. It only took me about 5 minutes, and I was able to, look at that, it's getting stuck, right? So if I bump that, and then, yeah, it gets past. See what I mean? That thing is really annoying if that piece up there is bent. So that's going to need some kind of, it's springy, so it keeps wanting to go back to that position. Bit of an annoyance. Right, so I cut 2 pieces 20 mil, and then I cut 2 bars at 14 mil, so you can see I even wrote 14 on that. This is the one that was lined up to the pencil mark, and it's reading just on it. Yeah, that's not too bad. So what am I going to do with these pieces? Well, I'm just going to show you what you can do with it if you wanted to mess around with making stuff. So let's just tape I want to tape the smooth side because the rough side's more likely to actually peel up. Right, and then I'll flip that over. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an actual switch and sit it against the, you know what, I cut these 14 mil for a reason, so let's just use these instead. Make sure I've got the good side for 14. Okay, so that direction's fumbling it a bit there. Okay, so that's 14. So I'm just going to lightly drop that in like so. Check on the other side. There's the 14 side. Lightly drop that in like so. And I'll get that and line that up. Right, so now I can peel those 2 off. And then we can see about how do we go about getting the maximum number of pieces to fit in there. So if I assume that that one's going to be 14 correctly, I'm going to get 1 space there, get another spacing there, and then I'm going to be just off. Okay, so if I line that up fractionally outside, maybe like that. Okay, and then I'll use the width of this one because this one should be a 14 and a half on this one. So I'll drop that into there, use that. Okay. Yeah, well, that one's moved. You stick on your tape. That one's not wanting to adhere to its tape either. How about we do that? Now, I'm not a super experienced person when it comes to woodworking, don't claim to be, but I think having this, I've obviously gone too far on this side because now I've got an indent on that side, but you know, as far as having a bit of fun and this allowing me to do a bit of woodwork type of stuff, I think this is definitely an option now that I can do small things with it. And there you go. If I'd actually glue those surfaces together with the PVA and I clamp it and everything else, I'm just going to use my fingers to hold it tight. I now have some switch mounting. And, you know, you can see that's a relatively neat-ish fit. Now, I know that's not perfect, but for a quick hack job, well, that obviously has a lot of gap space on the side there, but it still seems to fit, and so does that one, right? Obviously, I haven't taken the time and care to make sure that this is done correctly, but as a proof of concept, right, and I'm all about proving stuff can be done and works, this table saw will get you there. You buy some nice hardwood, maybe it's pre-cut strips, you might buy some offcuts from somewhere, from a local you know, workshop or something like that, or a timber mill, kitchen place, I don't know, somewhere that they scrap wood. Maybe if you've got some really nice timber in your own backyard, offcuts, firewood and things like that, and you can get it down to small manageable pieces, I think this could help you make small things. Artisan boxes, artisan cases, wrist rests maybe, tenting legs, little macro pad cases, all of those are viable options with this. Now this is about $90 plus shipping US. How durable? I honestly don't know. The fact that they've given you a belt means you can probably get replacements, and they do have parts that are designed to wear and fail. The sawdust compartment you already saw before seems to do its job, but the wall between the motor and the blade where it's being driven by that belt, there are small gaps in there. So over time, you probably are going to actually get bits of sawdust getting into the motor side, but it looks like you should be able to get access to all the screws to take it apart if you need to fully clean it out, since you're going to have to do that anyway to change the belt. And the fact that they give you carbon brushes, so it's obviously designed so you can change out the carbon brushes. Definitely some durability built into this. The only thing that they don't give you is a spare blade, which I think it would be nice if they gave you a spare blade. Though you could probably take this apart and straighten it up so it actually works properly. Or maybe I just have bad luck. So there you have it. This is the Minleaf ML-MS1 mini portable table saw. I think it lives up to its price, and I think it may actually be of value if you want to do small woodworking things, not only just for keyboards, but other little things around the house. 12mm cut depth, perfectly fine. Marine ply, perfectly fine. So there you go. If you got any questions about it, of course, throw them into the video section below and I'll get back to you. Hopefully I'll have a product link if you want to check it out yourself. Maybe if we're lucky there'll even be a discount or something. I don't know. Really just depends on if they're going to give me one. And if you want to see other stuff like this being reviewed, let me know what it is. Make some suggestions. I can always go and ask them if they've got something that I can review for you, and then you'll see it on this channel. So thanks very much for checking out the video. Please hit that like button, hit that bell button if you want to see more of this stuff pop up on your feed, and of course that subscribe button if you're not already a subscriber. Well, it's a wrap, and of course, as usual, until next time, happy clacking.